the opposite of what Labor will do.
I call Todd McClay.
Mr Speaker, thank you. The last speaker in this debate started her intervention by attacking my hard-working and very intelligent colleague Chris Okenvold. And she mentioned that she thought he could do so much better in his speech. Well, his speech was an excellent speech about the great job this government's doing under extremely difficult circumstances. I only wish I could say the same of the last member, that she too could speak better than the speech she's just delivered. But in fact, that whole speech was about what's wrong, not with New Zealand, not with this government, but what's wrong with the Labor Party and their view of New Zealanders, and the lack of desire they have for New Zealanders to get ahead, the lack of ambition for all New Zealanders. You see, Mr Speaker, this was one of the best budgets that Bill English has delivered on behalf of New Zealand. And we've had the great fortune on 5 occasions to stand up and say to Mr English, it's a very good budget for the times. We've got to remember that when we came into government, we inherited books that were going in the wrong directions, great debt spiralling, and that around the world economies were crashing, the global financial crisis. And Mr English has said to New Zealand, we have a plan. He's worked very hard over the first 3 years of this government to put in place some of the building blocks to fix the problems in the economy we inherited. Come the election a year and a half ago, we came forward to New Zealand and reminded them of the plan. We were re-elected, and this year Bill English has delivered another budget which is part of that plan, to build a stronger economy, a better economy that will do much more for all New Zealanders and place us put us in a much better place in the world. And this is just part of that plan that we move on with. And I think, Mr Speaker, that members of the New Zealand public, they get this. And certainly when I'm out talking to them in different parts of the country, they know we've come through difficult times, and they're grateful for the strong leadership our Minister of Finance has shown. You see, this is a budget that builds on the momentum that we've created over almost 5 years now. And it had 4 key priorities: responsible managing the government's books, and I'm certainly going to talk more about that in a moment, because we hear from Ruth Dyson and many members opposite, not all members opposite, but many members opposite, the opposite of that. That they don't want to manage the government's books responsibly. They want to tax everyday New Zealanders much, much more, spend on their behalf. Tax and spend, well, we've had enough of that. Building a more competitive and productive economy, Mr Speaker, many members of this House agree that that's what we've got to do. Where we have great difficulty in this Parliament is agreeing how to do that. And can I say to you, Mr Speaker, and to our Minister of Finance, Bill English, that the plan that he's put in place over the last 4.5 years is starting to show a great benefit in the areas of competitiveness and a productive growing economy. To deliver better public services for New Zealanders, because New Zealanders deserve those better public services. And I want to touch on a few of these in a moment, in particular the great work that Tony Ryle has done in health and the excellent levels of achievement we're starting to see. The job's only just started, but the excellent levels of achievement we're starting to see from Hekia Parata in education. And finally, rebuilding Christchurch, so very, very important to all of New Zealand, but particularly the people of Canterbury who've gone through such very difficult times. Mr Speaker, under unbelievably difficult conditions, Budget 2013 has freed up a further $1.5 billion by redirecting spending to where it matters most for New Zealanders. This takes the total reprioritisation by government spending between Budget 2009 to today of $14.9 billion. That's $14.9 billion that, had the Labor Party still been in government, they would have spent in areas that weren't productive for the economy. And woe and behold, heaven forbid, Mr Speaker, a Green Labour coalition government, that figure of almost $15 billion would have been so very much more, because Russell Norman and his mates already have got designs on more than $15 billion of spending of hard-earned money by New Zealand taxpayers that they want to take off them and tax, recycle and print a bit more to spend. At a time when the government's finances are tight, reprioritising spending allows significant additional funding for new improvement initiatives, and there have been so many of them. Mr Speaker, this budget was about spending well, not spending up. Spending well, not spending up. If Mr Norman has his TV on, wherever he may be, I bet you just turn it off, because he doesn't understand that. He understands spending more, printing more money. He doesn't understand it's about better spending. Mr. Speaker, in the economy we have a record that all New Zealanders can be proud of. It's not good enough yet. We need to do much more work, but compared to almost every country, every developed country in the world, New Zealand is punching above its weight, with the exception of one, and that's Australia. And haven't we seen over the last little while that things are not as rosy across there as they were? Can you remember over the last 4 budgets before this one, when Bill English got on his feet and delivered excellent budgets for the time for New Zealanders, the opposition were screaming and yelling, why can't we be more like Australia? Well, can I say to you, Mr. Speaker, and members opposite, if not for the great work of Bill English, they would have got their wish, because the Australian economy is going in the opposite direction to us now, and our economy would be so much more like theirs. Indeed, we have a 3% GDP growth rate forecast over the next couple of years, 3%. There are so many countries of the world that wish they were in a position to have 3% growth. In Europe it's negative still, in America it's floundering, in many parts of the world 3% is something they only dream of. And of course we know that mortgages are at a 50-year low. Well, that's very easy to say, but for those New Zealanders out there working hard through difficult times, who are earning their money, paying their taxes and paying their mortgages, they know there's real benefit to them in the interest rates being at a 50-year low, because that's money in their pocket that they get to spend. Debt is under control, Mr. Speaker. It's higher than anybody would want, but when we came to office in 2008, the forecasts were that debt to GDP would hit 60% by 2020 under the policies that were in place of the Labor government of 9 years. Remember, that Labor government had $20 billion worth of surpluses, $20 billion of extra money. And when they went out of government, most of the problems they accused this government of doing are not enough about, and can I say, Mr. Speaker, we worked very hard for New Zealanders. Actually, those problems were still there. They hadn't got better in that 9 years. The best we could say about the Labor government was at least it didn't get as bad as it could have been. But $20 billion of surpluses, all that skiting from them, and most of the great challenges this government inherited were still there. They were no better. Perhaps they were even worse. Well, under this government and Bill English's plan, Mr. Speaker, now GDP will peak at just under 20%. Will be just under 20% by the year 2020. That's a saving of $60 billion of debt to the taxpayer. Because under Labor and their policies, there would have been around $120 billion of debt and no possibility of any government surpluses any time at all. And under the work that Bill English has done and been careful about how we spend money on delivering better services for taxpayers, for unapologetically asking our civil servants to deliver more with the money that the taxpayer has earned and provided to them, that our GDP level will be 17.6%. Mr. Speaker, we're on track in 2014-15 to a surplus, a modest surplus of $75 billion. The opposition are already working out how they would spend that if they became a government. A modest surplus. Well, guess what, Mr. Speaker? This year, the amount that we will have to borrow is about $2 billion. So our deficit, government deficit, will be about $2 billion. In Australia, it's more than $20 billion. The country that Labor said over 4 budgets we must be more like. We must be more like Australia. Why can't you be more like them? Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, they're now thinking, I think, in Australia that they wish they're a bit more like New Zealand. I think they wish that they had Bill English as their Minister of Finance to put in place a plan to be very careful with government spending to make sure that they would get back to surplus and that their debt levels wouldn't grow. So we're on track back to a surplus. I want to touch on one thing that I think is so very important to New Zealanders, and this shows you the great difference between the Labor government of 9 years and the work we have done in 5 years. When we came to government, I had an elderly lady in my electorate write to me saying, Mr. Macleay, it looks like the Labor government has ruined ACC. I know times are tough. You can have my little payment that I get back so that we can make it survive. It tells me ACC is very important to New Zealanders. It's important to this government. Remember those billions of dollars of losses, the great challenges we had with ACC? Well, not only has the government been able to turn that around, Mr. Speaker, we've signalled in the 2015-2016 year there will be $1 billion of levy reductions to New Zealanders. $1 billion going back to them because ACC is now in great condition financially. 40% to a lower ACC levy signal for families and businesses. That's fantastic work. The member asked why not now, because we have a plan. We need to stick to it. It's not about borrowing and spending, as that member's party would do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora,